So my name is Rafat Rahmani. I'm the owner and founder of the Life Science Dynamics company. Started the company in 2004. We've been going for 19 years. And my colleague Vin will be presenting the majority of the finding. Without further ado, just give you a little bit of introduction to the talk. As we all know, a successful brand requires intimate knowledge of our target audience, target customer, their needs, wants, wishes, and desires, and which is underpinned by the strong value proposition that we as a company offer. And so different types of research methodologies and techniques are utilized to understand that target customers, whether physicians or patients. But within that, the whole segment of a structure, there is a competitors, there are customers, there are obviously contexts that we need to understand, and the controllers. So in order to understand that, first of all, customers, which is the physician and patient in our cases, is to understand a subsegment of a small population, and market research is vitally important in understanding how the valuable insight can be derived from our understanding of our patients and physicians. And sometimes it's always not easy, but it's difficult. But what are the unmet needs? What are the current frustrations with the current therapeutic needs? What are the current treatment pathways? Those are typical questions. What are the barriers and drivers of adoption of the new products? What are the challenges? How does the proposed messaging resonate or may resonate, and how that can be optimized? Those are the kind of things that we use market research to understand the physicians and the patient. And market research is quite expensive, time-consuming, and determined by if you have the good insight, and depending on the design of research, as well as the respondent type, as well as the moderation. And with that, I'll pass to Vin to carry on.
Thank you, Rafat. So thank you for the setup. And what we are leading to here is that, of course, we all need market research, and it gets us the insights that are ultimately used to help our brand succeed. But since it is expensive, time-consuming, and can be detrimental if not done properly, we really wanted to understand how we can avoid these things, how we can make it better and more efficient, more resource efficient. And it being respondent dependent at its core, I think, is a big component of why it is expensive, time consuming, and can be detrimental. So if we were to look at it in terms of more of an analytical view, we can come up with this kind of an equation, or just a ratio, honestly, to what is essentially efficiency of market research. So the efficiency equation would be something like we have the utility of insights obtained in the numerator and the cost of conducting that research in the denominator. The components that decide the utility are whether we use the right research design, do we have the sufficient sample size, did we ask the relevant questions, did the respondents remain engaged when they were being asked the questions, and then the quality of the content analysis or data analysis. And each of these things comes with its own cost. So we have to try and maximize the numerator here and minimize the denominator. And that's what we tried to do with this bit of research that I'll be walking you through after a moment. Of course, some of these things are not respondent dependent, such as the research design, content analysis, etc. So for this talk, I'm going to be focusing on how can we get the maximum sample size for our spend. How can we ensure that our questions are really getting us the answers that we want? And how do we get these answers in such a way that the respondent is really engaged and invested in the study so that they give us deeper insights? And how to do all of this while maintaining the cost low. So to begin, we actually first looked at a piece of research that was a survey-based research that was done by our friends at Survey Healthcare Global. I'm going to give a shout out to John Turner in the back, who shared this research with us and also helped us with the recruitment for our study. And as you can see here, not surprisingly, compensation is the biggest motivator for physicians to participate. But if you start going down the list of it, you see that there are several other factors that physicians can also hold in importance when deciding whether or not they participate in a given research study or in market research at all. And this is where we wanted to focus. So the questions we're trying to answer today are, what can we do to motivate more physicians to participate in market research generally? Because higher the number of people wanting to participate, lower is your cost of recruiting them and getting them to participate, just a demand and supply equation. And how can we keep them engaged and provide deeper and more meaningful insights and responses to our questions? So we decided to conduct our own research. We used our proprietary platform called iAdPort to do this research. The shape this research took was we recruited 44 US-based physicians. They were asked a set of predetermined questions, about 10 minutes worth of participation each day, followed by follow-up questions and probing on each day by our moderator. So this was a fully moderated discussion board. And then we analyzed these responses for insights. The key research questions that we targeted were what motivates physicians to participate in market research and to begin with, and then what makes them continue doing so. How can we get more physicians interested to participate? What type of market research do physicians themselves think they add the most value in? And what causes physicians to lose interest and engagement when they're participating in the study? And what can we do to mitigate that? Quickly, just an overview of the sample. We wanted to ensure that it's fairly representative. So we had 4 specialties included: gastros, cardios, immunologists, and oncologists, a fair bit of community academic mix. And we also made sure that geographically we had a good representation, and then the more populous West and East Coast states were not dominating the sample. So I'm going to walk you through these insights, research question by research question to kind of build on it. And yes, there are some numbers and some data here, but I promise I won't make it kind of a headache worth of report reading that you usually have to do after market research. We're going to keep it more interesting and engaging. So to begin with, the first question: what motivates physicians to test out participating in market research, and what keeps them coming back? What we heard from Survey Healthcare's research, it kind of got echoed here, that at least for the first time when they are looking to participate, additional income is the main driver. But you can also see that about a third of the physicians did indicate that just the curiosity to learn about their therapy area and market research in general was instrumental in pushing them towards participating in market research. But when we try and see what happens, or rather what keeps them coming back and participating more and more, we actually see that the opportunity to learn was mentioned by 75% of them, and fewer physicians mentioned the financial incentive. Still a significant number. And I think the quote there by an immunologist summarizes it well, that yes, primary motivator is cash, but that's just kind of getting them initiated, gets the foot in the door, and then they really need to find the research engaging and motivating, and there needs to be something in that for them other than the money, because as they of course progress in their careers, the incentive amounts start meaning less and less to them. So kind of goes with the logic there. The next question that we were targeting was, how can we get interested physicians to participate in more market research studies? And here we see that the COVID pandemic provides a very interesting case study, because we see about a third of them say that their participation increased. And overall, I think it was a bigger number that said that participation increased as soon as COVID hit. A lot of it has gone back to normal, so we see a bit of no change. But the main reasons that we heard for this was just that they had more time on their hands. They were not traveling to their facilities that often. Some of them had fewer patient engagements, so they could participate in more market research studies. And of course, at this time, some of their income was also hit. So this was a welcome replacement. And this was kind of also what we saw in the prior research from SHG, where length of survey and interview was cited as one of the biggest pain points or hurdles, or the turnoffs, so to say, for people to not participate. And that got confirmed by our research, where if you see scheduling issues and lack of time are two of the biggest avoidable pitfalls that we can get into when trying to recruit or trying people to get them interested, right? We also then followed up with them and asked them if other flexible discussion board platforms or any kind of research methodology that gives them more flexibility would be better. And we've heard an resounding agreement with this idea, because a lot of market research or a lack of market research engagement is not because they don't want to necessarily, but because they struggle to stick to those times of interviews or to take out whatever 30, 60 minutes to do a survey. And there are some other problems with online surveys as well that I'll get to in a moment. We also asked them what can drug companies and market research companies do to help other people who have not participated in market research before become more interested and participate. And one of the things that came up in this as well as in the prior research was that the screening experience can be quite bad from their perspective, not something that makes them feel like they want to participate. And it could be the length of the screener. Times it's the kind of misrepresentation of the time needed, especially for surveys. They say it's 35 minutes, it actually takes 50 minutes. But most of all, it was the fact that the screener does not really tell them anything about what the project is or what the study is. They get a vague sense of, oh, this is in this therapy area, this is in, say, head and neck cancer, but they don't get a sense of, oh, well, will my opinion and expertise be really of value here? And that's something that's really important to them. And that's why we need to start looking at screeners differently and see how we can also not only use them to screen people for our studies, but also advertise our studies better. The next question we looked at is, where do they think their voices matter the most? Because if you, as I said, if you can offer them more in return than just the incentive amount, if you can offer them a podium to express their views and voice and learn from their colleagues, that's of much more value. And what we saw is that a lot of these studies that are commonly done, they're kind of self-selecting themselves into it, because if you see the percent participated in and the percent believing that it makes best use of their knowledge is a bit of correlated. You see future and current product use drivers barriers as the type of research that physicians think that they can contribute the most to, and also the type of studies that they participate in the most. On the other end, you have things like promotional outreach engagement and, of course, pricing and reimbursement. Physicians don't really think of those in those terms, and they don't like to participate in them. There are some interesting ideas here as well, where promotional materials testing, I think physicians, what we heard in their comments was that they find it easy and sometimes fun, but they don't feel like it makes use of them as experts, more as like customers. So it's more transactional for them, and they will participate in it, but they don't particularly enjoy it. Then the next question that we wanted to explore was, what causes physicians to lose engagement during their participation? How can we improve this? This chart here is an interesting kind of baseline to understand how long do they remain engaged. And obviously, you would expect an interview or interactive format to keep them engaged for longer. And that's what we see here. There is a sharp fall off after 60 minutes. Whereas in a survey, it seems like a quarter of the physicians have lost track or lost interest by the 30-minute mark. So, and after that, there's a steep drop off. And I would argue that these numbers are a bit inflated, because they're self-reporting on how engaged they are in a market research study about market research studies. So I would say, you'd probably expect this to be about 60% at 60 minutes. So it's really tough for people to remain engaged and provide meaningful insights with the typical research durations that we typically employ. So then we dove a bit deeper into each of these formats of research and saw where the pain points are. With the surveys, I think, as I said before, it's a lot to do with the length of the survey, and also the length of the survey not being what it's claimed to be. And of course, it's difficult. It's hard to predict how long a certain person would take to go through a whole survey, how distracted they are, how much they already know about the questions we are asking. So there's always a disconnect, and it's also kind of then tied to how much they're getting paid for that much time. So that came out to be one of the biggest pain points. The other thing was the types of questions that require multiple repetitive data entries, like matrix-style questions, where we are trying to cram a lot of questions into one to kind of keep the question count low. And sometimes it makes sense for them to see all those questions on one page, but it's really tedious for them to do those inputs. There was a lot of displeasure expressed about chart studies, about surveys that ask about, how much do you like X rep versus Y rep and those kind of things. They just hated those. And so yeah, that's long screeners I've already mentioned, and then unclear framing of questions. If you look at interview-based research, I think overall the pain points are cited less often, but still delays and last-minute cancellations are more on the logistics side. Of course, they are. They tend to put off the respondents. But moderator proficiency also came out as something that people were not happy with sometimes, because you may have a moderator who's not maybe using the right tone, or is not familiar enough with the therapy area or the discussion guide or the research questions, and that really puts off someone who's really interested in sharing their opinions. Again, this is not something unheard of or rocket science, but we're just seeing to what extent this is being voiced and to what extent it affects people's willingness to participate in market research studies. So poorly thought out and repetitive questioning, again, similar to what we saw in the surveys, this just stresses the importance of framing questions correctly and asking them in the right manner. And again, here, I think I would say again that interactive formats that are flexible, they can be flexibly used, like the discussion boards, and when they're well designed, I think they can take care of a lot of these issues that are cited quite often by respondents. So we did ask them a bit about their thoughts on the iAdboard platform itself, how they felt when they're using it. A lot of them were using it for the first time, and we heard some really good feedback across the board. People said it was user-friendly, it was quite interactive, kept them engaged, and the other advantage of this is that we can choose to set it so that respondents can see each other's comments and responses. So they're not only putting in their responses, they're also seeing what others are saying. Sometimes we get engagement between the respondents. One doctor will comment on the response provided by someone else, and we get a good discussion going. We see where they agree, disagree, etc. So it can really be a very different type of research experience. So to summarize, I'm going to just go through the key takeaways. Going back to our market research efficiency equation and the idea of maximizing is that's our goal, right? I think, firstly, I would say carefully consider the type of study of the research you're doing. As you saw that as an industry and market researchers, we want physicians' insights on many different things. We want to understand from them about the therapy area, current and future drug products, product attributes, promotional materials and whatnot. But from their perspective, all studies are not equal. Some are more enticing to them than others. Some are better because they make better use of their knowledge and skills, value them as an expert, and those are the ones they're more likely to engage with. Doesn't mean we stop doing the other ones. It just means we need to think more about packaging the other types of research in such a manner that they see some value in it for themselves, or they feel appreciated as experts when they are participating in those. Secondly, use the screener to your advantage. As I said, it's a screening tool, but it's also very importantly your chance to tell them why they should participate in this study. One statistic I did not include in this report was that we asked them how many invitations for studies they get, and over half of them said they get 3 to 4 a week. Every week they get 3 to 4, sometimes even 10. So you are essentially fighting some other market researcher to get their attention. So the screener has to be a two-way tool where you screen them, but you also then try to kind of advertise yourself and say, hey, participate in my study because here's what it's about. Here's the type of insight I'm looking for. And I think you may be the right person to do it. Give them more information about what the study is. That will get them more interested. Rethink the survey design. Those repetitive questions and those things kind of have to be phased out. We may end up with shorter surveys that have fewer kind of charts coming out of them at the end of the day, but those would be more meaningful and they would be more trustworthy rather than just getting a whole bunch of statistics at the end of an ATU and trying to figure out why suddenly the trends are reversing or scratching our heads over why the demand is not what we were expecting it to be. Finally, we have cannot stress this enough. We should not be compromising on the quality of moderation. It's in qualitative research, it's pretty much a make or break. You may have an excellent discussion guide, really well thought through questions, but if the moderation is not on point, your respondents will lose engagement, they'll lose interest, and the responses will not be trustworthy. I think that's the worst bit because they won't just sign off and leave. They will keep giving you answers, but they may not be the right answers, and you may actually get led down the wrong path there. And finally, I would say think out of the box because we have been doing online surveys and interviews for a long time. But after COVID, I think there's a real need to make a mind shift here because people are not that inclined to spend that much time, especially in-person meeting, but even on a phone call, it becomes difficult to get people 60 minutes of their time sitting in one place and answering questions. On top of that, we're trying to share our screen and show them things or ask them to do things on their end. And then technical difficulties come in, and this is all a big turnoff, and it doesn't take too much for a physician to just say, I don't need to do this for an extra $200 or $300. I would just rather see a couple more patients. Right, so more and more use of flexible research methodologies and platforms will kind of be the future in this area. So thank you all for your attention. I think it's my last slide, and hope you enjoyed the talk. I'm happy to take any questions. I think there's some. Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of sense of cutoffs or guidelines for ideal survey length?
Yeah, so I think if I go back to that slide, yeah, we have a more detailed view of this. So we did the question when we asked them, we asked them at different time points. And as I said, I would take this with a pinch of salt that this is a bit of an overestimation. So I would say for a survey, 30 minutes is, you should never go over 30 minutes. You should try to be somewhere between 15 and 30. And more importantly, it needs to be more accurate. You can even give a range. What they hate the most is when you say it's 25 minutes and it actually takes someone 40 minutes. That's when it's a big turnoff. So for surveys especially, I would recommend not more than 30 minutes.
This might be a little bit off topic, but I was thinking as you were presenting, with thinking about kind of using primary market research being as an efficient resource, with the rise of secondary data and the availability of claims data sets and things like that, have you seen any change in maybe trends or demand or use of primary market research, from that perspective, like with the demand and integration of the secondary? Have you seen any halo effect on the demand use or trends with primary market research?
Obviously, this research was, as you said, not about that, but I think that's a great topic to maybe do some kind of research on. My gut feeling based on what's been happening this year, especially with the demand for primary market research, it seems that it has gone down a bit. I'm not sure if it's because secondary is being used more or we are getting better at integrating secondary and primary so that we have to do less of primary. But I would say there is a trend of doing less primary research. I think, as I said at the beginning, the cost, the time it needs, we're just moving too quickly for that to make the decision to spend X amount of X thousands of dollars on a piece of market research that may read out 3 or 4 months from now, and at the end of it, you may even still be scratching your head as to why we're seeing what we're seeing, and then you go back to secondary to try to validate it. A lot of people might be thinking, why not just rely more on the secondary and just get primary to fill the gaps in? That could be the trend based on just the decline in primary I'm seeing, but of course, that's something that can be tested out there with some research.
Hey, so first of all, just fantastic presentation. This was really insightful, so thank you for putting that together. In the conversation about drivers for participation, income was number one, and then the second one was curiosity. I worked a lot in the financial services space as well as rare conditions, and the way to get asset owners and rare patients and doctors to participate is telling them the why behind the research that they're doing, and engagement skyrocketed when you did that, right? In fact, I had a partner that said, if you don't tell me what the reason is behind this research, I'm not doing this for you. So I'm kind of curious, have you noticed that be more of a trend in just overall market research that is helping engagement, telling them the why to the extent that you can without biasing them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's actually a very, I would say, a natural thing to do in research. Like before being a market researcher, I was a clinical researcher. So I used to think of things from the patient's perspective, and there are more stricter ethical guidelines behind explaining things to someone who's participating in in clinical research. And once I started working in market research, I said to myself, why are we not doing it here? It's but natural that if you are more upfront about what you're looking for, more people would be interested to do that. So if it's a trend, it's more of people realizing that we haven't been doing it so far. It's not something that's kind of born out of a specific need, but I think if we do, it's a small thing. It doesn't take too much, but I think that by itself could have a big impact on the engagement that we get. It could also drive down cost of recruitment because we'll have a much bigger pool of people to recruit from or willing to participate in studies. So we're definitely looking forward to doing that more.
Just a quick question, detail on this slide. Are these U.S. physicians only?
They're all U.S. physicians, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Physicians who are not on panel, and also just diverse physicians, because there is a skew on like the types of physicians that participate. So just curious if you guys had looked at that.
So we did ask specifically them the question that you see there, and we didn't include all the details here, but I think the most common thing, and I think ties into the very first chart, is that for someone to take their first, dip their toes in, it needs to be financially attractive because you're asking them to take their time out to do something they've never done before, time they could use elsewhere. So maybe, I don't know, I just spitballing here, but some kind of extra incentive for first-timers. I don't know how that will work in implementation terms, but that could be a driver. Just trying to remember if there was anything else. I think that was one of the main things besides the screener, to be, in general, to be more communicative about what it is that you're wanting and then incentivize accordingly to get them over the threshold. Because as you see, once they are in, then the curiosity to learn and all of that kind of takes over, and they're okay getting a fair type of compensation. So yeah, that would be the recommendation. And I think I have more detailed findings as well on this we can share with you. Yeah.
Do you ever target residents?
You mean resident physicians? Yeah. Usually we only screen for board certified. So I would say no. I mean, if the research questions demand that audience, if they're your target audience, then there's no issue kind of targeting them. I'm sure all the panel providers have the necessary capabilities to target these people. And as I said, with the right type of incentives, I'm sure we can get them as well. But just traditionally, the market research we do is not targeted at residents.
Cheaper.
Well, yeah, but for a reason. So yeah, as I said, if it's the right fit, then of course, yeah, we can. All right. Any final questions? Great, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here today and give this talk. And yeah, I'll be at the booth, so we'll be Rafat. So happy to continue the conversation there if you're interested. Thank you again. you.